Good morning, Mike. It's Tuesday. It's autumnal equinox Tuesday in Japan, which is a national holiday, and that's why I'm coming to you from my bedroom and not my office. Specifically, I'm coming to you from the best lit corner of my room, which is next to the window. Also, I have no tripod, so I need the windowsill. Happy equinox! Excuse me a second while I go to the kitchen and make myself a pumpkin spice something or other. Wait, sorry, I forgot you can only buy green pumpkins in the store, and the only spice I have is this peppery stuff that I got in Nagano. And also, I moved to Japan before pumpkin spice lattes became a thing, and so I've never actually had, nor do I know how to make one. Question: have you seen many films by Miyazaki Hayao? Lately I'm reading a book of his collected essays from 1979 through 1996. That's before Nausicaa and the Valley of the Winds was made, and after Studio Ghibli was opened and became a big hit, and Miyazaki became one of the only sort of animators in the world that people recognized by name. I'm only 100 pages into this book, but here's the thing that I'm taking away from it so far. Animation is absolutely impossible. Animation is like building the pyramids or the Great Wall of China, except the people doing it get to be called animators. In fact, Mike, I'm not trying to jump to bold conclusions here, but it seems to me that every single piece of animation ever produced might have been produced by aliens. Because sometimes I think that is slightly easier to believe than a team of humans could, for love of work, certainly not the paycheck or name recognition, come together and bind themselves to a single vision, and then bind themselves to a drawing board to sketch and paint 24 pages per second of animation under deadline in a group over time every day, and if people don't like the finished product, your studio might go bankrupt. Yeah, so no pressure, huh? This has been really interesting for me because, like you, I studied a lot of literature in college. I've always been interested in different artists' creative processes because it helps me understand how somebody can proverbially pull a rabbit out of a hat. Somebody can go from an idea to a physical thing that people can see and experience for themselves. But this Miyazaki book has been helping me realize that I've been falling into this trap that John Green calls the great man theory of history. It's the idea that history, out of a need to accommodate the human attention span, focuses on so-called key players. Your Alexander the Greats, your Tokugawa Ieyasu's, your Rosa Parks. We like to focus on these people's lives because they became the tipping point and a watershed moment in history. But by focusing primarily on their lives and secondarily on the context in which they lived, I think we kind of set ourselves up for a mental bias in terms of history and art as his story or her story rather than our story. Did you see what I did there with the pun? I gotta thank my 11th grade history teacher, Mr. Sirianni, for that. It stuck with me all these years. I love it. I love it. And so getting back to this book, animation is a team effort. It's impossible to produce a feature-length work of animation by yourself, even if you have the patient sort of work ethic of a Chris Ware or a Don Hertzfeldt. But I think animation is just a more direct example of the process that underlies most projects everywhere. Even though my own otaku focus, Alan Moore, works by himself in the middle of England, he never would have been able to produce his most famous works if he hadn't been so social in the late 70s and early 80s, meeting people like David Lloyd and Dave Gibbons, and starting a snowball of influence that culminated in the publishing of a handful of books that did to the American comics industry what David Bowie did for the music industry in the 1970s. I hope that David Bowie reference was accurate. I have a lot of friends that know a lot about David Bowie, and I don't know anything about David Bowie. It's a tough thing to get away from, attributing a project to an individual rather than the group that deserves it. It's not a habit I'm going to try to stop in conversation, but it is something I want to be more aware of when I use my thinky bits. It's been about 5 months since my friend Steve and I opened an English conversation school, and it's been tough. The last 7 years I've been working as an English teacher, usually as the only non-Japanese person in the building, and about half the time as the only English teacher in the building. I've gotten used to preparing class by myself, usually with only my ideas and Google Sensei as a guide, and my history of studying solitary writers, artists, and cartoonists has only reinforced this idea that work is something to be done by yourself. And now, big surprise, it's not the easiest thing in the world for me to be in charge of task management and working on a team. So with the hot and muggy chaos of summer finally winding down, I'm looking forward to calming down with the rest of the natural world, at least in this hemisphere, and taking another look at my schedule and my to-do list and Tetrising everything into better, more aligned blocks of tasks and hopefully get better results out of it. But how about you, Mike? You too mentioned that you are trying to ratchet up your production output these days. How's it been going? What are all the things that you're working on lately? Please point me to them. Down here in the comments, over there, in your next video. Alright, Mike, have a good Shubu no Hi and mata kondo.